Hello and welcome to People in Perspective. My name is Alicia Heninger and joining me on the show today is Mike Puccinelli, a CBS 2 field reporter. Thanks for joining me on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for asking.
Can you sort of give us what is the field of broadcast journalism that you do?
Well, I'm a general assignment reporter, so I basically do the story du jour, the story of the day, generally. Very rarely do I have something planned ahead of time, but every once in a while we do have what we call enterprise stories that I've kind of planned a couple days in advance. Well, tomorrow we know that Governor Blagojevich is likely going to be sentenced, and so tomorrow I do know what I'm going to do. I have to be outside his house tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in anticipation of his walking out, presumably after he's probably just kissed his daughters and wife goodbye, knowing that he's likely going to get locked up. So I have the, in a way, unenviable task along with other reporters of approaching him when he probably really doesn't want to talk to us, to ask him, hey, what are your thoughts now as you head off to possibly begin a stint in prison?
So what kind of got you started in this field, like any high school classes or college courses? Or
You know, I think one thing I would say would probably be I always was interested in the news. I mean, I was a paper boy from 1977 on. I remember when my mom told me when Elvis died, she was like, sat me down. She's like, this is a big deal, you know, whatever. And I was looking at that. And then, you know, as a boy, you were often fascinated by the morbid and the macabre. And I remember as a paper boy, you know, reading about some horrible serial killer in New York called Son of Sam. And then after that, John Wayne Gacy happened. You know, and I was fascinated because you're kind of drawn to that horrible, sick stuff. Sometimes, especially boys, sometimes are fascinated by it. And I always found myself kind of reading it. I also liked current events and world news and world affairs and stuff. And I think that just kind of escalated over the years. I still maintained an interest in college. And then after that, I ultimately decided, you know, this is probably what I know. Why not do something that I know? Go for this. So
did you take any TV courses in high school or anything like that?
You know, I didn't, because I'm not nearly as well informed as you are and your colleagues here. I mean, this is an incredible set. At Oak Park River Forest High School, where I went just up the street, your rival, they, I think, had something pretty similar to this. Only for whatever reason, I didn't have as inquiring of a mind as you do and didn't even explore it and didn't know it was there. So I was definitely at a disadvantage as far as that. But you know, if I knew now if I knew that then, I probably would have taken it, because I mean, I can't imagine this wouldn't give you a leg up.
So what about college? You know, where did you go? What did you sort of study? You know.
Well, I kind of bounced all over the map. I initially I tried to swim my way to college. I went down south to SIU for a year to swim, and then I came back. I took a year's worth of courses at a JUCO. And then I actually went to Lawrence University, a small school in Appleton. I was a poli-sci major, still hadn't done any TV. I came home, I was substitute teaching at some high schools in the area and also some grade schools. And then I thought, you know, I'd be watching the news because I was always still interested in it. And I thought, you know, if I don't try this, I'm going to be kicking myself 10 years from now saying, you wuss, why didn't you go for it? And so then eventually I was like, you know, I got to do this. So I enrolled at Columbia College downtown, all so I could get an internship, basically so I can learn the types of things you guys are learning here in this class. Because I knew that you need to learn by doing, and I knew that in order to get a job, I probably had to have an internship and do well enough in that internship in order to parlay that into a job. Now, having said that, I was always, you know, pretty good about writing and following the news. So I did have that, although I didn't have the technical knowledge and know-how that you guys certainly have.
So when did you enroll in Columbia? Like, how old were you when you really
I think I would say I was probably 23 years old.
Okay. So why did you choose CBS, or were they the ones who offered you the job? Or?
Well, this wasn't my first company. I mean, I started, you know, I first took an internship at, there was a show called McNeil Lehrer NewsHour, which you probably have never heard of. It's now called the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer, but I wanted to go national news initially, I thought. And then I went from that internship, which I did okay at, I didn't do great at. I learned important things. The next internship was at CNN Business News in Chicago, and then I was able to parlay that into a job in New York City, working behind the scenes as a production assistant and stuff like that. And I started as a per diem guy, and then that was back in 1992.
So, like, what else have you been doing, like your current work, other than like the Blagojevich stuff? You know, what else have you been doing like currently?
Well, we'll do whatever happens that day. We start the day off with a story meeting at 9 a.m. We go in there, and then they'll say, okay, Mike, what do you have today? And I'll have hopefully gone over some newspapers. I'll gotten online. I'll go through my emails, see if anyone's given me like a good story. Like the other day, and I'll look for stories at all angles, at all places. I'll talk to people. The other day I was in court because I got a speeding ticket, and I was in there, and I found out that there was an ambulance driver in court who had been pulled over for speeding while on a run to an actual call in his ambulance. To me, that's like, okay, that's a news story. So I'm planning on calling that guy. I'm going to make it happen. The fact that an ambulance driver gets pulled over on the way to a call, they then had to call a second ambulance, you know, that was like, okay, eureka, this is a story, boom, makes my life easy. Because the hardest thing in the news business is trying to find the news on a slow news day. I mean, it's real easy when there's tons of stuff happening.
I see. So, like, what have been some of your favorite pieces working on? Well,
you know, there's all sorts of new experiences. You know, I mean, I've worked in a bunch of different markets. I worked in Dubuque. Started out in New York City, like I mentioned. Then I went from there to Dubuque, Iowa. Took a massive pay cut. Went from there to Evansville, Indiana. From Evansville to Memphis. From Memphis to Chicago. So, I mean, it's first of all, it's great to see other parts of the country. But I really enjoyed, you know, the first time I was ever in like a flood. I mean, it was, you know, it was cool to see. And actually, as an intern in Chicago, we had a flood you probably don't remember, but it was back in like 1991, I think, where the entire downtown flooded. And all the buildings, the downtown had to be shut down. I was able to go into like the basement of City Hall and the basement of Board of Trade when they were filled with water, you know, as an intern, you know, and those are the types of things that you can do. You go see a tornado. I've covered the Pope, you know, I've met, you know, unsavory characters, you know, that you get a chance to be up close with, where you wouldn't want to ever be up close with them normally, but, you know, people that are convicted of murder, suspected of murder. And then there's the great stories just about really inspiring kids, you know, like I did a story on a child that can't smile, but the smiles are inside, you know, and that was the theme of that story. So there's all sorts of different things, and that's what I like about it, is that every day is different.
I really like that, I think that's really cool. What is like a typical day? Like, I know you said it really jumps back and forth between a lot of different things, but if you had to pick something that's sort of like usually happens like most of the time, what would that be?
Well, it's there's often, you know, there are political stories that you know are going to happen. You know, certain things you know, anytime there's any type of if there's any type of corruption or anything, people in the TV news, they always want to follow that closely. Like certain criminal cases are pretty big. They've become notorious, like the Drew Peterson case. I don't know if you've heard about that. You know, anything with the governor is a pretty big deal. That's why, you know, I know tomorrow we'll be all over that governor story. Weather is a huge deal. I mean, anytime there's a big weather event, people seem to care about weather more than anything. And then sometimes, you know, if there's ever any type of cruelty to animals, you'll find that in the news business, people really care about their cats and dogs and animals. So those tend to kind of become big stories.
Okay, well, thank you for joining me on the show today. That's all the time that we have. So I'm Alicia Heninger. Thanks for watching People in Perspective, and we'll see you next time.